morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio, 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev. And on today's show, we are going to be looking at minute 74 of the movie, in which Paul Sparicki just loses it and goes chasing after Jenny Slater, whilst we meet Terry Rothstead again before Martin finally breaks away from the hustle and gets to catch up with somebody that was clearly a good friend in high school, played by KK Dodds.
Mm-hmm. Joining us on today's show, as he's been with us all week, we have movie superfan Kosmas. Kosmas, how are you, sir?
I'm awesome. Thank you again for inviting me for these episodes this week. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Always good to talk with you. So let's start with this minute then. We were discussing Pivens and his character Sparicki last episode. And here we have this moment where at the end of the last minute, he has declared himself to be in a great deal of pain, and Martin is about to reply, and Martin's reply is fascinating because Martin's reply basically is his moment of connection. He suddenly feels he can say something that is real in a sea of people lying to each other. Or I suppose we could say Jenny Slater isn't. She's probably the most honest one so far because she's just like exactly the kind of person she was and treats it the same way. But having said it's a festival of pain, I find it interesting that he says the thing that Martin reacts to and responds to, which is the idea that they think that you can't evolve. That notion, right? That's such a core notion. And then, of course, ironically, it's then intercut by Jenny walking right through them and Paul going, "Oh, Jenny," and running after. So clearly he hasn't evolved. But it's that notion.
And, yeah, that's the irony there. But it's very true. And I think in some sense, 10-year high school reunion, this is me philosophizing a little bit. 10 years is enough time for you to realize you can evolve, but maybe not have actually changed that much.
That's deep.
10 years you've gone from high school, you've gone through college, right? And that has some change to it. And then you're still pretty new in the working world. You're still trying to find your feet. You're still, on the bottom rungs of the career ladder. Assuming you're going the college into working world path that seems to be, the expectation these days, legitimately or otherwise. You've not necessarily built much experience or social capital in a professional environment. So, in many ways, you haven't changed that much, I feel.
Yeah.
And Paul is kind of underscoring that by still going after Jenny as the the dream.
Yeah, I got to go with you on that. I think that's both deep and actually what we get from this. I think that's actually the reality of this moment, right? All that satire and all the humor is only there to mask an emotional reality that the film is engaging with in an interesting way. And I think the line about evolution is spot on, and then the fact that he ignores that completely. But I think for me, what's important is not Paul. That's the laugh. I think it's Martin's face.
Yeah, because this is the moment that he's facing, right? Is he going to change from what he was, right? Is his evolution going to happen? We've seen him go back and forth on this. Is he going to fall back into his old ways? Is he going to shed that off and move on to something else? And we still don't know at this stage of the film, right? Like, it feels like it's moving like he will break free and reinvent, but
I guess we'll see.
And then we have Steve Pink burst back onto the scene as Terry Rothstead, the security guard, because it was only a 3-week training course, or 2-week training course, and I think that his acting in this scene is significantly better than in the first scene. you know, one of my least favorite minutes of the film, one of the hardest for me to actually like come up with positive, enthusiastic things to say is that, you know, the couple of minutes where he's outside the front of the house and everything is super awkward. And this is also awkward, but it feels like it kind of speaks to this sense that you've got, especially in America these days, and I don't think would have been so present in the front of people's minds back in 97 when this was made, of you know, this kind of pressure cooker environment that kids in high school are put into, with a lot of, you know, social pressures, academic pressures that they're put through and don't necessarily respond well to. And I think Terry is an embodiment of that, right? This is, you know, kind of a prototype of what can lead to gun violence in high schools potentially, right? This kind of, you know, kid that didn't have a support network, didn't have maybe, you know, strong social network, and was quite isolated. And in this case, I guess, you know, it's still kind of there, but he clearly had a relationship with Martin that he felt very strongly about, even if Martin doesn't really remember him, right? As we saw it earlier on. And that's kind of what it takes, is having some kind of social network there to help these kids out, to keep them from being overloaded by the pressure they're being put under in these environments, which is kind of a dark thing to have to face and think about, that, you know, it really is quite so Lord of the Flies in American high schools. But I think that's kind of where we're at in many ways.
Would they nowadays at least have some sort of security to prevent him with coming in with a gun? I mean, after 9/11, I assume. I mean, the airports got tighter, but because,
Yeah,
I mean, the way he handles the gun.
yeah. I mean, in US schools, it's not so much as a result of 9/11, but certainly as a result of Columbine and then later high school shootings that have taken over the media. A lot of schools have metal detectors on entry. Not all of them do. It's also like often a reflection of gang violence and, you know, other areas of, you know, potential issue in American society in general, but that obviously bleeds over into high schools, especially, you know, when a lot of gang business kind of predicates using those underage because of the more lenient sentencing, etc. They're going to face much less severe penalties, and it's a, you know, a very dark system. But yes, there absolutely would be. Would it be in a high school like this that's in a fairly affluent area? Probably not. And even if it was, would they use it for a reunion with, you know, quote unquote full grown adults? Again, I think probably not. But at this time as well, I don't think this was particularly widespread, right? You know, pre 9/11, as you said, post Columbine, I'm pretty sure, but before that became just the first of many, tragically. So this has suddenly turned into a very, very dark.
Well, what so I started professionally teaching in '96. I've done my training '95 to '96. And the school I trained at in England, we had an exchange program with the University of Southern Mississippi. So we got students. A student teacher would do their training there, then come over to us for a couple of terms, and then go back. And I found myself in the position of being the liaison for that program. And our first student teacher who came over, Cora, was filling me in. So this is 97, 98, was filling me in on the schools that she trained in Louisiana, which had, at that time in 97, 98, they had the clear backpacks, they had the metal detectors, they had all of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that had already come into play in that time period.
That's interesting to me, because Columbine is the the first one that I think of, the
Yeah.
earliest high school shooting, and that was actually April 20th, 1999.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that the rising gang violence
Gang violence predates that,
and
and especially in
precisely.
areas like LA and stuff. It
But
was
even somewhere as rural as Louisiana, you're starting to see issues. So, but it was interesting, that was a thing we would. The reason the discussion came up was because we had the shooting in Scotland here. Oh crikey, my brain! I can't remember the name of it.
yeah,
Yeah, it happened around that time because I remember going into the staff room and talking about it with other teachers. So it was definitely a thing that was happening around, and it was like a current issue. I mean, the Montreal Polytechnic shooting had happened in 88, 89. So
yeah,
yeah, this
yeah.
was a
You're
thing
right.
in the air. But I think you're right. I think for an adult, I can't imagine that for an adult reunion gig, which is effectively leasing the school out for an independent group, the alumni association to run. I can't imagine you'd bother, right?
Right,
Like
right.
it's just paying adults.
Yeah. So you were referring to the Dunblane massacre, which
That's it.
was in March of '96, and yeah, I remember that because it did change quite a lot in how schools approached security
Everything.
in
So,
general.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we went from not paying. There was a massive change in the expectations of teachers and what we were supposed to do and how we were supposed to do it in terms of talking to strangers, being aware of who you are looking at when you're out on duty in the playground, all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and sadly, that's never left me.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Let's cut to the
I
introduction
mean,
of. Oh, yeah, go for it, Cosmo.
no, I just want to say we had a great segue actually because you were talking about the pressure cooker and all that, and we have the great song coming up, Under Pressure.
oh, good
Obviously,
point.
maybe it is a bit too late, but
No,
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 um,
no. I
I
like that.
like
I
it.
like that. Yeah. Let's go with
so
that.
that's how we.
Yeah. So I think possibly one of the most memorable scorings of the film for me. It's this and it's Violent Femmes, Blister in the Sun earlier in the film are the two ones that I always think of. And anytime I even hear those songs, I think of these scenes.
Yeah.
And I think for this one, it's particularly because you cut from Walk Like an Egyptian, which is very fast tempo in the middle of a mass of people, right, kind of on the quote unquote dance floor of this gym, to getting out of the crowds, kicking up Under Pressure, much slower tempo, much more kind of like late into the night feel to the scoring, to the pace of it, and a very different vibe in the interaction between the two characters. These are characters that, I mean, presumably haven't seen each other in a long time, but you get the feeling that they really were quite good friends back in high school. And it's not about careers, it's about family, and it's that next stage of life beyond what you'd really expect to see maybe in a 10-year high school reunion in modern culture. And I realize like age of having children is very different in different places, but this is the only woman who's brought a child with them that really has, that we've seen, that has kind of this sense of family, except for the woman at the desk whose name I forget, who obviously is very proud of her family. But this, you're obviously meant to be thinking from Martin's perspective of moving on with life, like what is the ultimate purpose here, existentialism, and he's kind of starting to get into that mentality as he sits with Tracy, played by KK Dodds.
Yeah, I quite like the way Tracy takes the way the conversation moves here because she's obviously had this conversation already in the evening with other people. She knows what people are going to say to her because she's sitting there with the baby and she hasn't just turned up to get off with somebody who she missed her chance with 10 years ago, right? She's there having done the successful thing, and more importantly, she's happy with that, right? She actually is enjoying it, and that's the thing she talks about, and it's so at odds with everyone else there. in a really good way. And you can see the change in the way Cusack plays Martin. Martin goes from casual and reactive to focused and interested and alert, right? And this is a revelation. This is a possibility. This is a way forward, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
and it's again foreshadowing, right? What you guys said, like she tells him how married life can be or will be, and not like others maybe told him. It's not, his life won't be over. It's actually super awesome. It's everything is great.
Yeah.
Which may be a lie. No, I'm just kidding.
And seemingly in contrast with Debbie's experience, right? She's obviously divorced at this point, so it didn't work out for her. But this is that kind of the hopeful chord in the musical scoring of the composition, right? This is that moment where things could change.
Yeah. I mean, Dodds is interesting. I've seen almost everything she's been in, weirdly, in this time period in terms of TV and film, and yet, she hasn't registered with me particularly, as a good actress. And I think she is a good actress because she does a lot with very little. And it's also interesting that Cusack obviously liked her because they go on to do. I mean, she's in Being John Malkovich. She's in High Fidelity. She somebody he obviously comes back to, and I think that's a good sign. I think a lot of people in this film, that they're good people because good on camera and good at what their roles are, because Cusack goes on using them as he produces films, and I think that's interesting.
Also, Baby Robbie is featured in this minute, and we will get to see a little bit more of Baby Robbie in the next minute. So I'll maybe hold off on that one for the next minute.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Shall we wrap this one?
Let's do it.
Okay. So that's your outro.
This was minute 74 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Sodiger and Hugh David.
Today's guest, as he's been with us all this week, is Kosmas. Kosmas, where can people find you online?
Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter, and as you guys always mention, on IMDb too. Obviously.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. You can also find us at all good podcast players, YouTube for the video version. Also find us on X. You can also listen to us on Spotify. In all cases, our handle is at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio, same spelling as our website, debiradio.com, DEBI Radio.
And if you want to talk with us about this film or films in general, you can join us on our Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't done